And thanks for sticking with us into our second half hour today as we are doing something special. We have pulled in some expertise this afternoon to help walk us through this. I'm Jason Wheeler, and we're talking about this. As younger kids can now get the COVID-19 vaccine, we know that parents out there have a lot on their minds.
Hi, it's good to be with you. I'm Sonia Azad. We're tackling some of your most common questions about these vaccines. We've got, as Jason said, a team of experts with us this afternoon who are ready to get those answers to you. So I want to start with how many children have taken their first dose of the COVID vaccine. The Texas Department of State Health Services reports Dallas County vaccinated the largest number of children 11 and under so far. More than 2,100 have had their first dose. In Tarrant County, more than 1,700 children 5 to 11 have received the vaccine. Collin County has vaccinated more than 1,500 children so far. Denton County just under 700. So joining me now is OBGYN Verywell Health's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jessica Shepard, and Dr. Dawn Johnson, Medical Director of Primary Care at Children's Health. Thank you both for being with us. You know, I want to start with kind of the latest news today. Texas actor Matthew McConaughey says he has not vaccinated his kids. He himself is vaccinated, his wife is vaccinated, but he, like a lot of parents, have tons of questions. This is one of your most popular questions, parents, that you were asked or have asked. Does the vaccine cause reproductive problems in children? So I want to start with Dr. Shepard for this one. What do you tell parents who are asking this?
You know, I think that question actually comes from a very valuable pace of looking out for children and their future endeavors when it comes to fertility. But what we have seen in studies is that this does not impact fertility whatsoever. You know, when we first were in the beginning parts of the pandemic, that was a very high question that we saw from OBGYN and fertility experts. But there was enough studies that were shown early in the studies, as well as the disease, showing that it does not have impact on fertility. And therefore, we are able to advise patients who are trying to get pregnant, are currently pregnant, and even in the postpartum phase, that the vaccine is very safe.
And Dr. Shepard, can we just add, you know, ACOG as well as all of the other leading organizations in this country have said, you know, yes, go ahead, it is safe.
Absolutely. When we look at ACOG, we look at the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, and also the society that deals with reproductive endocrinology and infertility have all come out and made very strong statements supporting the use of vaccine and people who are pregnant and looking for fertility in the future.
All right, I want to get to our next question. This is a great question. Is the shot safe for anaphylactic kiddos, meaning if my child has an egg or a peanut allergy? So Dr. Johnson, can we ask you that question?
Yes, mine was a little bit easier. Yes, it's absolutely safe for kids who have had reaction to nuts or to eggs. There is no contraindication to receiving the COVID-19 vaccine for those children.
Dr. Johnson, I'll stay with you for this next question, which is a great one. Who is held liable if my child gets myocarditis? Now, this idea of myocarditis, we really have to dissect, right? Because not all myocarditis is created equal, and that's been shown in the data. But what do you say to parents who go, well, what if my kid, this happens to my kid, then what?
Well, I'd say that we do advise or let parents know that particularly in males who are young adults and adolescents, there is a risk of myocarditis after vaccination with the COVID-19 vaccine. That risk, however, is extremely small. Less than 0.0001% of males will get myocarditis after vaccination. Look out for chest pain, shortness of breath, or fluttering or rapid heartbeats. If you notice that, contact your healthcare provider. In terms of who is liable, you know, I think that's a more difficult question. Most cases of myocarditis after vaccination are mild and resolve with no long-term consequences. I would recommend reporting those events to the Vaccine Safety Monitoring Committee, which you can find at the CDC, and parents can make those reports and then discussing it with your physician, pediatrician, and then deciding from there.
Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and add myocarditis, for those of you who might be wondering, is just inflammation of the heart muscle itself. Okay, let's get to our next question. Who conducted the safety and efficacy studies here? Third or unbiased parties, or did the companies do that in-house? I think this gets to the processes. And so, you know, Dr. Shepard, do you feel good answering that question?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when we look at vaccines in general, or even any drug related issue, when we're thinking of who runs the studies and the trials, you know, the FDA and the CDC are always make sure that there's going to be a number of unbiased trials and studies that are done that are not necessarily funded by pharma or organizations and companies that might have some weight into what those results might be. You know, and researchers really do take the serious steps in looking at modification of medications and also disease process, because we really do want to be able at the end of the day to treat patients effectively and have patient safety. So the most important part for the medical community is to make sure that we have numbers that we can rely on. And this is why it's so important that researchers take their job and use that without any bias, rather, and making sure that these numbers and these studies are done relatively on the distribution of a community that is representative of the country.
And I can say, as a person who's listened in to all of these meetings, I mean, there are discussions for hours, so many questions that these virologists and scientists and physicians have been asking. So don't think that it's just slipped right through. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of questions that go into this. And a lot of these people are parents and grandparents themselves. Let's get to our next question now. Compared to developing nations or other developed nations, are they also vaccinating their children with this, or is it banned anywhere? Dr. Johnson?
Not that I am aware of. The messages we are getting is that other countries and nations are eagerly awaiting access to the vaccine. I am not aware of any countries who have banned it. And the hope is that at some point this vaccine will be available, accessible, and affordable for children around the world.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, I have family in the Middle East. They're not vaccinating with the same vaccines that we have access to. They have vaccines from China, India, and Russia. And so there's still a lot to be seen about the efficacy and the long-term safety of those vaccines as well. Okay, who will be held, again, we've got a question about liability. Who will be held liable if my child has an adverse reaction to the vaccine? And, you know, we should say that, Dr. Shepard, you don't just get your child vaccinated and then they walk out. I mean, there's a period of time where there's an observation.
Yeah, you know, these are very important questions, and I'm so glad that you're asking them, because these really are the questions that parents think of when they think of their children and vaccines. Now, typically when we look at vaccines, you are going to have what we call side effects, which may be mild, moderate, or severe. Now, the most important part is when we were looking at the studies and looking at side effects and, you know, reactions to the vaccine, we were really looking for those severe complication side effects that might cause a hospital admission or cause something long-term. So when we look at the mild side effects, that's mostly going to be some type of fatigue or, you know, tenderness at the injection site. So trying to change that narrative of not necessarily looking at who to blame if something happens, but looking at the severity of what happens. And again, how you're able to get through that after with your healthcare provider, and also making sure that you know the information before you get the vaccine and that you feel comfortable with that. I think that we have come a long way in being able to describe what the vaccine is, how it was studied, what are some of the things that people might have as a side effect, and really gathering information so people can make informed decisions.
Dr. Shepard and Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.